Ballots to approve. Let's call our meeting to order since we're all here and we can stay on time. For those of you that don't know, we have 3 members of the Board of Elections, and we're all here and we're ready to go. And I understand, of course, Arnita Dula is here from the city, and then we've got some folks here who were involved in the petition drive. Probably wouldn't hurt anything to have everybody introduce themselves, just so we know who each other are. I'm David Hood, I'm the chairman.
I'm Karen Hoyle.
I'm Barry Keene, secretary.
And how about you all? Would you everybody say who they are?
I'm Alan Wood, attorney. I'm here with the petitioners.
Right.
I'm C. Jane Johnson.
I'm Billy Fuller, Citizens for Equity in Government.
Walter Witherspoon, I'm the signer of the petition.
I'm Tom Shell. I'm an associate with the Citizens for Equity in Government, and I'm a member. Have a blog called the Hickory Out.
And I'm Arnita Dula. I'm the staff attorney for the city of Hickory.
And for those of you who don't know, this is Larry Brewer, who's our director of elections. All right, as the first order of board business, are we going to approve these 2 absentee ballot applications? Okay. Larry, what other business do we have?
I guess we can talk about the special election
Okay.
for the city.
All right. Arnita, has the city made any decisions yet about timing and language or anything like that?
No, that's the reason I'm here today is to hear about and make sure we understand the procedures that need to be followed regarding the timelines that the Board of Election is under, deadlines, that kind of thing.
Okay.
To make sure all those work together.
Are you talking about the deadlines for the special election that need to be called?
That, as well as any other steps that must be taken along the way. You know, as our understanding, we have a certain time frame within which we must hold the election. And we're not certain as to how that impacts the job that you have to do with regard to making decisions or that kind of thing. So again, we're just here to sort of flesh out what the timeline has to look like.
Well, the most important threshold issue is the date of the special election, which needs to be called by the city.
Right.
And it needs to be 60 days from, I guess it was, what was the date? Well, I was trying to remember the date. July 3rd was the day. That was last Tuesday, was the date the petition was certified and delivered. So that's 60 days forward from that would be the earliest date, and then 120 days would be the latest date.
Right.
It also cannot be 30 days, less than 30 days before the general election in November. Right. So that gives you about a 5-week, as I recall, threshold or window to set the date.
And there's also the 45-day
Notice
period.
Yeah, and I know last meeting we talked about those issues about setting the date of the special election does not have to be on a Tuesday, which I had assumed it did, but we couldn't find a requirement that it be on a Tuesday. Although my editorial opinion about that is that people are used to coming to elections on Tuesdays. So if you want to make sure people remember to go on election day, it seems to me like Tuesday's a good choice, but that's just an editorial opinion. We also talked about the language of the petition, or the language of the referendum that's going to be voted on.
Yes.
There's some suggested language in the statute itself, which you probably looked at. It's just really basic stuff. And I had suggested last week that it would be good if everyone agreed on the language, although I don't think that's statutorily required. But it does. The statute does have some requirements that about the language, but it doesn't mean that it has to be approved by the petitioners, of course. And one thing I had said last Tuesday, which I will reiterate, is if someone asked us what would be the best for processing the election and having our staff not be pulled in 5 different directions getting ready for the presidential election, would be to have the election earlier in that window as opposed to later in that window. Simply because the closer we get to the beginning of November means we've got a lot of stuff going on. And presidential elections are very stressful anyway and very time consuming anyway. When early voting would start for that election, you know, the 3 weeks before. So the earlier the better for us. And I think we'd all agree with that. We just have a lot going on. Not that we're complaining.
May I ask a question about the early voting for this process? That begins 2 weeks before this election, or you just said 3 weeks before?
Well, I was
Is that mandatorily for the?
I was using sort of broad language.
Okay.
It starts the Thursday.
The third Thursday before election day.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's not exactly 3 weeks, but
Every election.
Would that be if the election were not on Tuesday? Would that be the same?
It don't matter what day, it's just gonna start the third Thursday
because it's
before.
specific
Before
to
the election
Thursdays.
date.
Got it.
But that has to, the 45-day notice intersects with that though, right? Okay.
Yeah, further limiting the time frame
Yeah,
that we
it's
can do this.
narrow, even narrow. What kind of time frame does the Board of Elections need with regard to the approval of the language?
Well, that's
that
a good
is
question. We
submitted?
have,
Well, the sooner the better, because we have to,
Submit
the
it.
program has to be completed, the ballots have to be printed, so as soon as possible.
Okay. When you talk about printing ballots and other steps that you all have to take, can you explain a little bit more what kind of time you need? I mean, I understand the sooner the better, but are there any necessary requirements that you're under, statutory or policy-wise?
Well, there has to be enough time for the people to do the programming. The program is done by ES&S,
Programming referring to?
the programming of the election into the voting system.
into the machines.
Yes.
Okay, so the machines are going to be
Well, what we decided, I can't remember if we actually voted on this last week, but we would want to use paper ballots
Yes.
and not. We have both kinds of election equipment, but there's not any good reason to use the electronic equipment for this election. Paper would-
So ES&S would not have to
But
be
the
involved
machines
in
still
that,
have to be
right?
programmed
Yes,
to.
still have to do
It's
You
programming.
still have to program, even the paper ballot machines still have to be programmed to
Right.
accept
The
ballots.
M100?
Yes,
Really? Oh,
It's a different type of program.
okay.
yes.
Okay. Are you all under any time constraints with regard to submitting anything to the State Board of Elections? Or is it all done here locally?
It goes, once we go to a date, I'll advise the state board that we're having an election on a particular date. And that's about as far as they're involved in it. Of course, at election night, the results all go to the state.
So they can be reported from a central location for one thing.
But as far as the actual setting of the date, you know, it's left up to the county to do that.
Now, the state board generally approves the ballot
Yes.
design. Is that going, that would be true in this one
That's
too,
correct.
wouldn't it?
But not the language on the ballot.
No, that includes the language on the ballot.
That is inclusive?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
How much time do you think they need?
How much time do we usually submit it ahead?
There's
of
really not a
election?
timeline, it's just the fact they have to approve the language. And as far as approving the language here, it's so the language is not negative for either side, is what they're looking at.
Okay, so basically, according to the statute, council has to adopt a resolution and submit that to the Board of Elections.
See, that'll
Then you
come
in
to
turn
us.
submit that.
We will not have to submit that to Raleigh. We'll tell them, you know, the council has, as far as, they have to know that it has been done, but we don't have to send them anything on paper stating that. The board does that right here.
But once we make the proposed ballot, which includes the language you're talking about,
Yes.
Okay.
then we would send that to the state board and say, here's the ballot we propose to use for our special election on such and such a date. Now, there's simply not a time
So there's nothing in the statute
specified on
required?
that, no.
Okay.
It's just a question of the earlier you do it, the earlier you can get it approved. And just like us, the state board has a few things going on during the presidential election.
Well, just a few.
So the earlier the better. I can't be any more specific than that just because there is no more specific deadline. It's just we would love to have it yesterday.
Sure.
We'd love to know yesterday when the election is, and we'd love to have the language yesterday. So,
As far as this election goes, you know, Hickory they do absentee ballots, so people will be able to request one by mail. So we start mailing out 30 days before election day.
But your timeline doesn't come into being an issue until 15 days past that the July the 3rd, because you have the 45-day window with the notification.
Yeah, advertisement's got to go about 45 days before the election,
So nothing really can happen before then anyway. I mean, you would like to have it early, but that's when the time frames start coming into sequence.
As soon as we know the election date, the time frames are important.
See, if we had the wording on the ballot today, the printer could start printing the ballots tomorrow. They could start doing the programming tomorrow.
Okay.
You know, there's no really time frame. Just the sooner the better is what it boils down to. True, it's got to be advertised 45 days before the election.
Does the 45-day notice include the language on the ballot?
I don't think it says that required. I think it would be great if it did, but I don't think that's required under the statute.
But that's like a legal notice that's published in the newspapers and stuff.
In theory, you could do that without the language for the ballot, but it would be better if you had the language.
Well, how then does that work in conjunction with the 45 days notice? Because, I mean, based on what you're saying, then the proposed ballot has to be submitted to the state. They have to sign off. Can you give notice prior to, if you are including the language, you couldn't?
We could say it's...
Just, you're going to be holding it, right?
Yeah, but we might also put the language in there. We might put some additional language in the notice saying that this is the proposed language.
Okay.
As long as this group approves the language, the state's not going to say anything about it.
They're not.
Okay.
And we're talking about the state approving ballots. The state approves all ballots in North Carolina. No matter what the election is, they have to sign off on the ballot. As far as the layout and the way the way the whole ballot's laid out.
Okay, you've already addressed the local board's preferences that the election be held on a Tuesday if possible.
Well, that was one man. That was one man.
Is that a vote or just?
Yeah, we did not take that vote.
Okay.
That was just me making an editorial comment.
The city has the right to set the date, right?
They do.
Their resolution.
All I was saying about the election day is that people are used to voting on Tuesdays, and that you're going to throw them a curveball if you don't do it on a Tuesday.
Are any days off limits? I assume weekends, Saturday, Sundays,
I don't think there is a statutory limitation.
holidays are off limits?
Holidays are off limits,
Okay.
yes. You couldn't do it on Labor Day, for example, even if that was within the time period, which I can't remember if it was.
What do you folks think about having it on an alternate day instead of a Tuesday? I mean, a lot of countries vote on the weekends. They feel that they have a better turnout if people are not working. You know, a lot of people have a hard time getting away from work, so. But then we have early
Preference
voting.
is to limit confusion.
We have early voting, so if, working is a problem, you can always go vote early.
That will expand or narrow early voting depending on how you set it.
Right.
Because they'll go to statutory regardless of the election date.
Do you have any preferences, or should we just stick with Tuesday? What do you think?
I would propose that the city wants all available options to consider at this time and not be restricted.
Well, we can't
I know you
restrict it.
can't.
We're just making conversation.
Right, we always want the public to have a say, even if it's not, just the city. We like to have their opinion on what they think would be a good voting day for the people.
My opinion is right now, I'm appalled with the fact that they didn't come in here with anything. Right now, knowing the information that was given, and knowing that the staff and what they have, understanding of the law and so forth, I'm just surprised that they didn't come in here with anything right now. I don't understand that. I have a problem with that.
Well, the council has not been able to meet to even adopt a resolution. Their next regularly scheduled meeting date is not until next week.
We understand.
And then to call one, they would be, of course, to call a special meeting. But I think this process is new to everyone.
It is new.
From my understanding.
No, that's true. We're all in virgin territory here, I think.
Well, personally, I think that's fine. Come in here with an open slate, get ideas. That's no problem, Billy. But as far as the issue with the date, I really do believe that it behooves us to keep it on a Tuesday because
Yeah.
people their whole lives are not used to special elections and flipping in a brand new day, and that could lead to confusion, which would you may have problems with turnout as a result of, if we end up calling this on a Friday.
People are going to forget that it's not on a Tuesday.
Yes, sir.
I mean, that's just the way people are hardwired to think.
Yes, sir. And that's all from the angle of access. I think it behooves us to have, because you're going to have an early election process, and those other days can come into play if they have a problem with getting to an election on Tuesday. That's the whole reason why that the early voting process came into existence to start with.
I want you to do it
mail
on.
voting will be available too.
It'll be available too. Yeah, exactly. I just want you to do it on a Tuesday so I can remember what day.
But just so I make clear with the parameters, because there are so many parameters dealing with dates that it's going to,
There's going
to be able to hit it on a Tuesday,
Yeah.
is going to probably narrow it down, just a guess, maybe 2.
I agree. Maybe 3 at the outset.
At the outset, because if early election starts the 3rd Thursday before the election date, but absentee ballots can be requested 30 days prior to, plus you've got to get the ballot set and into the state, and so it's going to be narrow.
You're talking the 2nd or 3rd Tuesday in September or something
Right.
like that.
There have been precedents where the 30-day deadline wasn't met, sometimes the printing of the ballots and stuff, and they were a little bit late. The requests can still be received, and you just hold them till you get the ballots, but
We've had that
should be
happen.
an insurmountable obstacle.
I agree.
Just keep in mind that September 4th, that's the day after the Labor Day holiday, to deliver equipment. They're going to have to deliver on the 4th, which is a holiday, which, and plus our people are going to have to be working on Monday, the holiday also.
To set up the voting
To
locations.
set up, pick up equipment, all the people working the precincts will have to be working on it.
That'll
On the
increase
Labor Day.
the cost of the election yourself.
Yes, I'm sure the moving company will charge us probably time and a half to deliver on Monday.
And it would be aggravating to the people involved to miss whatever they've got Labor Day plans. Again, not that there's some statute saying you can't do it on the Tuesday after Labor Day, but we do think that would be a bad idea.
But that's the earliest date available, right?
I think it would be.
So you
The earliest date
realistically
would be
11
Saturday, September the 1st is the earliest. That's
Yeah,
the
but that would be
61st
it's
day.
Tuesday. That's why I said the 2nd or 3rd Tuesday. so
Well,
you
that's
make
the other
more sense.
thing, so it can't be held on the 60th day, it wouldn't be anyway,
It
because
has
the
to
time
be
frame's too short.
between 60 and 120 days. I'm assuming it could
Okay,
be held
full
on.
60, with the count
60.
starting the day after. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay. So it's not counted like under sick or little sick, it's not counted.
I don't think so.
Okay.
There's people that still debate about when the statute of limitations runs out. Is it 3 years to the day? Is it the day before the 3 years? There's still debate about that.
Well, I think that date's
It seems like the 11th or 18th would be the most realistic date to get it as close as you can away from the November election, but give everybody time to meet all the deadlines and everything. That seems to me like that'd be logical.
Other questions?
The early voting now, since this is a Hickory election, I mean theoretically it has to be here in this office or at the library, or can that be just done in Hickory?
We think it's just going to be done in Hickory. We think that everyone would approve that
And
and Raleigh or everywhere else.
the
yeah.
city would have to approve that too.
They would, but hard to imagine. I mean, we've done Hickory primaries before, and I've always done the early voting over there. So,
The state has to approve early voting plans.
right.
And we've had it before when Hickory has a Hickory primary, to have it in Hickory instead of down here, and the state has approved that. No problem, since it's just Hickory involved.
Yeah, we think that'll definitely happen again.
Which means, what I'm thinking too is the council may have to have some special call meetings. I think it's important that, I hear you say that the council hasn't met, but, like they've said, this is new for all of us, so they may have to have call meetings and special meetings in order for us to get this into that deadline. I think one of the things, the real issues I'm hearing everybody say is the timeline. You're talking about September, the holiday weekend. We were talking last week about cost-cutting measures using the paper ballot. Then we were looking at September the 11th, which we were talking about that's 9/11. Are people going to want to go to the polls on 9/11? So, you know, my thing is the dates. Those timelines are so important. So councils may have to, you know, opt out to have a special meeting to actually handle this resolution to get it out there so the people can vote, and it'll be a good day for everybody to get out and vote and do what, you know, what has been said. I think that's the real issue, is making sure that the people can get out and vote on that voting day, whether it be a Tuesday or Saturday. And I'm totally in agreement that Tuesday is a good day for voting. So that's when the people can
preference
out.
would be earlier rather than later, to the extent that you can make the deadlines, right?
Yes, for purposes of our,
Rather than do it in October,
yeah.
better than September.
Right.
If somebody asked our
Yeah,
choice,
your
that
opinion,
would be our preference, yes.
The latest possible is the first week in October. It has to be 30 days before the November election. The first week in October is the very latest. But again, earlier is better than in that first week in October. So really we're looking at the month of September.
Other questions or comments?
I have a comment. Are we clear on the time? I think the idea was the time, and I think the language portion of it, which I understand the city has a responsibility for that. Okay. And then they're going to present it back to you guys.
They'll send it back
for
to us.
approval and stuff. In doing that, it's up to the city, I guess, to have someone else from our group to participate in that. But I mean, not a good gesture or whatever. That might, if we start off, we start off the beginning, whip it together. So if we come and bring that statement that we did together to y'all, there should be no problem.
It would save time.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So that, you know.
Well, that was sort of another editorial comment I made
Yeah.
last week.
Yeah, I'm saying I'm asking as the president of the city. That's what I would. You're doing that.
We would certainly be willing, I think what he's saying is we would certainly be willing to present
Yeah.
two people acceptable to the city to help sit and help with this discussion and to have input from our group, and we would certainly be happy to provide that.
The only thing that this group is worried about is wording of an election to where you flip affirmative and negative wording into an election. I can't give you an example off the top of my head where it would seem that you were voting for and then you're voting against, or you're voting against and then you're voting for. That's where, I mean, we've seen that happen in ballots in this country before, and we want to limit that confusion. And when this wording comes to you and you see something such as that as a possibility where it could lead to confusion, do you have any input into, you know, providing whether can you negate that ballot?
First of all, I wouldn't expect the city to do something like that. To be
I
honest.
wouldn't either, but I'm just saying.
Secondly, I think the statute has in there, and it's not this particular one, but I think our role is limited to seeing if the statute has been followed.
Okay.
So if it's anything more judgment call than that, that's not our judgment call to make. That's my opinion. But again, that's one man's opinion out of
Yeah,
three.
I haven't read anything about that, but I think we can, like David said, we can have an opinion. We can express our opinion that, you know, that we don't feel that this language is, you know, but that's as far as we can go.
But we just feel like it would be best to keep the language as simple as possible. It doesn't need to be 3 paragraphs and then a vote.
And that's one thing the state office told me. It's not what's on the ballot is not an editorial it's fair to both sides. If not, they will not approve it.
But it can summarize the ordinance. It doesn't have to repeat all the technical language. You know, to me, just a sentence or two. I mean, if you follow the statute, it should be easy. You know, you're electing ward members within their own wards. I mean, that's.
Well, it's got to be a little more specific.
I know, but
That's kind of what they're already doing in a sense. So you got to be a little more specific.
No, they're not.
No.
No, they're not.
Well,
Wards
again,
don't pick their representation. The city does as a whole.
I'm just saying, you need to be a little more specific because the ward does pick within a primary who's going to be the two candidates for the, so that's what I'm saying. You need to be a little more specific just to make sure it's clear what's being changed.
Right.
Can't be quite as general
General
as
election.
Alan was
That's what they're
saying.
changing. But the city has control of that. I mean, they have to pass an ordinance that deals with these issues, and that's just, you know.
Yep. After the outcome of the referendum, or the petition, or whatever you want to call
I
it.
mean, but setting the election and the wording, that the city.
You mean ahead of
has
time,
full-
yeah.
They have to do that too.
But it's by resolution.
Not by ordinance.
Not by
Yeah.
ordinance.
But they have to adopt that ordinance after,
The
assuming the change.
Assuming
Assuming there's a
it's
change.
affirmative,
Yeah,
yeah.
assuming there's a change. All right, any other questions or comments?
Do we have any concept of what a timeline might be?
I think there's some ideas, but I can't speak for council.
Is that, are you asking about a
A
date or
timeline
like?
for making the decisions. I'm not asking about a date.
I can't address that, I
Okay.
don't know.
Thank you.
Will it be brought up at their regular meeting, as far as you know? Or, you said 17?
I don't know. I mean, that's their next regular scheduled meeting, but I don't know if that is going to be on the agenda. I haven't been informed of that.
And how are special will be called meetings advertised?
It's posted, it'll be posted on the door, on the web, and then posted in the paper. It has to be 48 hours notice prior to the special call meeting.
All right, anything else? Larry, do we have any other board business?
Yes.
Okay.
So as far as this process goes on, need a special review. If I can help you, by all means, give us a call, or either of the board members, give me a call. Same true for everybody else as you go through this process.
We're done with this topic, if y'all want to go. I'm sure we have some much more boring things to talk
Yeah.
about that you don't care about.
I did, but and it's on the table. I didn't have any.